Hey everybody, it's Jackie with Jackie's Wreaths and Things. You're gonna have to forgive the humming in the background because it's too hot for me to turn my air off to do this. So I want to show you how to incorporate lace into your fabric pumpkins. They're pretty popular. Adding fabric to them, it kind of gives a nice Halloweenish look. It also gives a very elegant look depending on the fabric pattern that you use. So I have animal print here that I'm going to use. What I have here is a pumpkin that I bought last year from Walmart. The first thing I'm going to do to this pumpkin is I'm going to take the stem out. And I'm going to pull it off to the side. And then the next thing I'm going to do, and you don't have to have this tool to do this, but I'm going to make the hole bigger because we're going to poke the fabric down into the hole. So I'm just going to kind of round this out quite a bit. And I'm going to dump the excess in the garbage. Now I'm going to come down to the bottom of the pumpkin and I'm going to create another hole. And I'm going to try to make sure that it's centered. This hole as well, the reason I'm making it is because we're going to poke the fabric down into it. So I'm going to round the hole out pretty good to give it some space and room for the fabric. So we're going to do this kind of similar to another pumpkin that I did, but I'm going to show you how to incorporate the lace. Okay, so now let's grab our fabric. So it doesn't matter which way that you use your fabric for this project. So the first thing that I want to do is I want to take my fabric and make sure that I have enough for it to wrap completely around my pumpkin, which I did. So the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to fold this up a bit to make it easier to handle and to cut. So the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to measure from here to here with my fabric. And I want it to go over enough to have enough fabric to tuck it in. So I would say at least 4 inches over, because you're wanting to tuck this in. So you're going from center to center. You're only measuring half the distance and not all the way around. So make sure that you've got your pumpkin sitting in the middle of your material. And I'm going to cut the salvage edge off. So I'm going to wrap my fabric up first. And what you want to do is you want to make sure that you start your fabric in the pumpkin ditch, because that's going to make it so much easier to cover up your seam that you're going to create. So I'm going to lay a bead of glue in there, and I'm just going to pull the center of my fabric down into that and press that down. Now I'm not going to go all the way up and around with this because it's just not necessary. So the next thing that I want to do is I want to roll my pumpkin until the two seams meet. So I'm going to fold my excess fabric kind of back out of the way so I can see what I'm doing. I'm going to fold it a little bit further so I can see what I'm doing until I get a little bit over. I want to be a little bit over so that I can fold my fabric over. So I'm going to cut the excess off. And now what I want to do is I want to create a seam to prevent the fray. So I'm just taking a bead of hot glue and folding that over. And you don't have to go all the way out. So I'm going to fold it back a little bit further because I want that seam directly in the ditch. The reason I want it directly in the ditch because that's where my trim's going to go, and that's going to hide that seam, making it look seamless. So now that I've got it folded over to where I know my trim's going to go, I'm going to hold it there because I don't want it to move. And then I'm just going to take some glue in the seam again. Hold it down. Now you don't want to pull your fabric too tightly around your pumpkin. You just kind of want it snug because how you pull it this way is going to matter most because you want it to go into the ditch. So if you pull it too snugly this way, it's going to be hard for it to shape into, I call it the ditch. Who knows what it's called? I don't. So I just call it the ditch. So I'm going to start at my seams and start tucking my fabric in. I like to do two sides at one time at first. And then I'm just going to grab my pumpkin. And then you can use a stick. I've used scissors before. Be careful using the scissors. And just start tucking the fabric in. And I kind of pull on it. But don't pull too much because otherwise you're going to pull fabric up from down here that you need. So on this side, I'm being just a little bit gentle. Not pulling too much at one time. And I don't want that fabric to pull up. We just want to really just tuck on this side, and we'll use the other side to create our shape. Alright, so now that I got the fabric in there, and you can notice it's still kind of a little bubbly and stuff like that, but don't worry, we're getting ready to pull that out on this side, because this side is the side that we're going to give a little bit more pull to the fabric and get that shape. So as I come around, now I'm going to pull and I'm gathering the fabric up as I go. So now that our pumpkin is covered, so this is the bottom, so I'm going to shoot a little bit of hot glue in there so the fabric will hold. But not too much because I don't want it oozing out. I'm not filling the hole up. Cooling it off a little bit because I don't want it dripping out. Because I'm going to come back up here and I'm going to grab some of these pieces that are still like pointed out and tuck them a little bit further in. So basically just keep tucking your fabric until the pumpkin is smooth to your satisfaction. Okay, so now we want to add some lace. So this is new for this year as well, incorporating lace into our pumpkin. I got this lace from Paper Mart. It is 3 inches, and I was like, well, that's the perfect size to do this. So I'm not going to cover every bit of it with lace. I'm going to go every other one to create the design. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take a little bit of hot glue and I'm going to go directly in the center. And I'm kind of help pinch it up. And I'm going directly on top of the bump. So this lace that I got has a little bit of pull to it, so I'm going to pull on it. And so I don't have to cut it, and I can just keep on going. I'm going to shoot just a little bit hot glue, not much. I don't want a big mess, and I'm going to push it down into the hole, and I'm going to use a stick to do that. Like I said, this way I don't have to cut it. And I'm going to keep going directly across. I'm gonna cut the excess off. Just a little bit of hot glue. Don't need much at all. And once again, I'm going to use my stick to poke that into the center. So I'm going to do every other one to create a pattern. Now be careful when you pull your lace, because you could accidentally rip it depending on how fragile your lace is, so you don't want to pull on it too much. This lace does rip. I use it in rag bows, so I can tell you it does rip. So I don't want a big gob of hot glue in there, so I'm tucking this one first before hot gluing this time, because what I'm going to do is add my hot glue now, and that's still going to hold this down because it's lace. To add my last piece. Now you can cover this with a color, and you can buy lace by the yard and cover over it as well. There's all kinds of, different looks that you can create with lace. You can buy it in a cream color. I chose black because of the leopard print. So there's all kinds of stuff that you can use to bling these pumpkins out. I'm going to use this. I get it from Walmart. It's 3 yards. It's 6 inches wide, 3 yards long. I have found that this I can make go a long way, because I can control more how many gems I put on the project. So what I want to do to make this less time consuming because we are wrapping it, and that way you're creating actually less bulk, because I'm going to wrap it like I did the lace. So I'm going to come all the way around, so I'm just going to hold this and measure it. And then I want my bling to be 2 gems wide. So you just set your scissors on there, and you can hold your scissors and pull, and it'll cut right off. So always make sure that with your gems and stuff that you go directly to the center, because you don't want an ugly line. You want to make this look as seamless as possible. So we're going to take our trim right down into the ditch, and this is where our pumpkin's really going to take shape. So if you're afraid you lost shape of your pumpkin, you probably didn't. You're just going to gain it back when you add your trim. So I'm just going to kind of hold that one there, and like what I like to do is I like to add on a couple. That way that one can cool, and I can keep moving forward. Okay, so what I'm going to do now is I want to make sure that my lace and my leopard print are actually 2 separate things. So as I'm coming down the ditch, I'm going to scoot my lace and make sure it's in the ditch as well and not overhanging. And I'm going to come down. So you kind of want to, you don't want to pull on this too tight, but you want to pull on it enough that your bling is creating that definition of the ditch. So that we don't end up with a bulky bottom. I'm going to press this in with my stick. And then so I can continue on. I'm just going to use a little pin to hold that, and once again come straight across. Scooting my lace over. Pulling on my trim. Now I keep these little bamboo sticks so that I can poke directly into the bling and not end up with a glue mess. And I'm just going to trim the excess off. And it started to pull back so that I can continue on, I'm just going to grab a pin and pin that there so it'll hold while it cools. And then that way I can just continue on. And I'm not having to wait for it to cool. So I'm making sure that my bling is on top of my lace because that's going to secure it down. And that pin head decided to stay. And that's like one of the worst things. I don't like it when that happens. I try to be really careful when I'm using pins to hold stuff that I don't set it into my hot glue, so it won't do that. So the reason I'm not hot gluing when I go around is there's really no reason to. If you pull your trim tight enough to where you're not snapping it and breaking it, it's not going to come out of the ditch. So there's no need to make a further hot glue mess. And I think that instead of gluing this, I think I'm just going to take this black pin and use it to hold it there. And then because it's so small and everything on the last step, we'll just sink it in because it's not going to hurt anything. So the biggest thing is you want to make sure that your lace is underneath your trim and not sitting beside it. Because if sitting beside it, it's going to droop out over it. And you don't want that. So we need 2 more pieces to finish our pumpkin. There's all kinds of different gems that you can, gems like this you can get. I have seen black on black. I've seen purple. I've got teal. I just like to use this one the most because it's a good neutral diamond. There's lace. You could just use lace as a trim as well. Just get a narrow enough lace. Now this one, to create a leveling, I'm just going to come straight across. That way the pumpkin will sit correctly. So I'm being very careful to go to the center because the stem on the top is going to cover up my seams on the top. So that's what I'm going to use my stem for on the top. So I want to show you one more thing. If you don't have the hand strength to deal with a pin, there's these what they call greening pins, and they're really inexpensive. So if you want to, before you go your last lap, you can use the greening pin, or you can even use it at the end to make sure that all your gems are secured down and tight on the bottom. You just kind of gotta get it in there where there's no gems interfering. To hold it down. And you see, you can't even see it in the midst of all the gems. So now we're ready to put the stem back on. Our pumpkin is finished, but we don't have a hole big enough anymore for the whole stem. Plus we need to clean off the orange. So we're gonna clean it off. Now you can buy a different stem if you want to. I just prefer save money, reuse. If I don't like the color, I can paint it. So what's going to have to happen is I'm going to cut off a good portion of this, but I'm going to leave enough to go down in the hole, what's left of it. So I just cut it right off with my cutters. It wasn't that big of a deal. And now I'm going to be careful because you don't want the hot glue oozing all over the place. So I'm going to put it right around the stem area. And just make sure you're not being too over liberal. And then I'm going to place the stem back. So it just so happened that the stem for this pumpkin I didn't feel like needed to be painted because it still matched a lot of the leopard print. I hope y'all enjoyed this tutorial on how to add lace to your pumpkin. As you can see, it's another way of doing bling. It's another way of being unique. Bye, y'all.